Hello everyone. So there is a phenomenon that I have noticed in strip clubs that doesn't really get talked about outside of strip clubs, but I have seen it and I've seen a lot of other people kind of reference it. And I don't think anyone's ever really taken the time to kind of spell it out, so I figured I would do that because I always thought it was one of those things where I would look at other dancers and be like, oh, okay, strippers are crazy. Whatever. And then I noticed that I do this too, and I was like, oh no. I do this too! So I figured it would make an interesting video. But before we get too far into that, do you enjoy science fiction? I wrote a novel. It is available on Amazon. There's a link in the description. You can read it on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, or if you are a fan of physical copies, we have paperback. And if you have already purchased it, please consider writing a review because it helps me with the Amazon algorithm, but it also gives me good feedback so that when I start working on the next novel, I can hopefully improve on my craft. So anyway, I remember when I was a brand new dancer. Like the first year that I spent dancing, and within the first few months, I saw something weird. And at that point, I had been in a strip club for, maybe 6 months. And so I was used to, there's a lot of weird in strip clubs. And at that point, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, there's weird stuff happening here all the time. So this is just more weird strip club stuff, right? But it kind of stood out as particularly weird. There was this woman who came in, and I do not know how old she was, but she was old. Her face was very wrinkly and saggy. She kind of had jowls. Her chin was kind of saggy. The whole front of her body was very saggy and wrinkly. So, like, I've got that going on myself, so I'm hyper aware of it. Like, after having my 4th and 5th kid, I wasn't able to move as much during those pregnancies, so my belly got a lot of stretch marks, but then I also have like really crepey skin that hangs loose off my belly, so I lost the weight, no problem, but I have all this loose skin hanging off of my stomach that looks really, honestly, I think gross is a good word. And so she had a lot of crepey skin, she had a lot of wrinkles in this whole area of her body, and if you're working as an exotic dancer, if you're working anywhere in the sex industry, you do not want to have crepey, wrinkly, aged skin in this region of your body, like scars and stretch marks and any kind of blemish in this area, not good. And she had all of that. And I don't remember, like, I never found out how old she was, but she was talking with me one day, and she had like a 9-year-old son or something like that. And I was sitting there thinking, this is kind of odd, but, I just sort of went about my day because, like, most of the strippers I worked with were in their mid to late 30s anyway, possibly early 40s. And it was this small town club, so it was really, really remote and really, really isolated and really, really rural. So it wasn't particularly surprising that all the women around me were, a good 15 to 20 years older than I was. And they hated my guts because I was young and fresh and relatively carefree and happy, and they were honestly old and bitter and dried up. And that sounds really bad, but now that I'm their age, I'm looking at the way they treated me, and it's like, those bitches were jealous. Like, I didn't know that when I was 21, but those bitches were jealous. Anyway, this gal who came in, she was really sweet, and she was nice, so I treated her nicely because it was like, well, as long as you're not being an absolute monster to me, I don't really care. But she was so old. And I just looked at it like, what are you doing here? And she didn't seem to have the self-awareness to realize that she was too old to be working as an exotic dancer. And I mean, it seemed immediately apparent to me. It's like, you have wrinkles on your face. Like, your skin on your face is literally sagging. You can't be doing this anymore. But there she was, and I remember there was one day the very first day she came in, she didn't know how to put on her own makeup because her husband would always put on her makeup for her. And she was asking me to do it, and it's like, dude, I don't even know how to put on my own makeup. How do you expect me to do it for you? And so, like, that was a little bit awkward, but she really didn't know how to do anything for herself. She'd had her husband doing it for her for years and years. And apparently she had a 9-year-old son. And I'm sitting there listening to her, and I'm sort of putting the pieces together about her life. And I guess one day she just kind of either hopped on a bus or hopped on a train or something and left her family behind, just kind of out of the blue, no warning, She took her son's CDs. So she took his like Britney Spears CD and brought it with her so that she could use it to DJ her own music at the club where we worked, because the first club I worked at didn't have a DJ. They had us supply our own music, which was terribly stupid. Not a great idea, but that's how they did it. And so I remember when I got hired, they were like, well, you have to bring your own music. I was like, I don't know what's popular, but apparently I had to bring my own music. So I brought a bunch of stuff that I thought might be popular, that it turns out wasn't popular, and then people were complaining to me all the time, and I hated doing my own DJ work. But she had taken a bunch of her 9-year-old son's music CDs, and oh, the skinks are coming out. There's a cute little lizard in our yard. My daughter's gonna be so excited. She likes catching those. My 10-year-old daughter. So, like, that's one of the other things that's been really weird, because I look back on that memory and then I look in the mirror, and the thing about this woman was she seemed to have like no self-awareness at all. Like, she really thought that she could still pull off the whole dancing thing. She was like, well, you know, I just need to get a little bit of a boob lift. And I'm looking at her entire body, which was covered in wrinkles. Like, her legs were covered in wrinkles, her arms were covered in wrinkles, like her whole body. And I'm just like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything. And so now I've got a kid who's about the same age, and I'm like, I'm looking at myself, and it's like, okay, I don't think I look that bad. Do I look as bad as she looked? Because I remember she looked pretty bad. And so then I go to my husband, like, I need a reality check here. I don't care which direction reality goes. I just don't know if I understand reality at the moment. This lady had like no self-awareness, and she had just, I guess, up and left her family and taken her son's music and showed up at the club one day and started dancing. And I mean, the way that club was set up, it sounded like a good idea on paper, but it really wasn't. They had one of the dancers be in charge of managing the dancers. Sounds like a great idea. Who knows dancer business better than a dancer, right? Except she had this nasty habit of driving off all the competition. And so, you know, she hired me because, you know, I was bald and not much of a threat to her, but then she started treating me nasty when I was making like 3 times what everybody else was making. And there was another girl, I remember she hired her and then proceeded to drive that girl off real quick. And then she hired this gal, and it was like, what were you thinking? Like, she auditioned, you hired her, but what were you thinking? So it was not a particularly well-run club. It wasn't the worst run, but it was not particularly well-run, and part of the problem was that the people who had been put in charge to manage different branches of the club were not necessarily operating in the club's best interest. So this lady, she's coming up on stage, getting naked, and I remember sitting down with some of the customers and talking with the customers, and they called her the Crypt Keeper, which was not particularly nice, but I understood why they were calling her that. And so it was like, it was one of those moments again where it's like really awkward, because you don't want to trash talk this gal, even though she's obviously got no business in the strip club, but you don't want to trash talk her. And so it's like, I'm just sitting there like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything at all, because this is way too awkward of a conversation for me. And eventually they just fired her. Like, I guess the head manager of the club showed up, saw her on stage, and went to the dance manager and just looked at her like, what the hell is going on in this place? So she left before, I think, the week was up. She was not there very long. But it never quite left me that, number one, older dancers don't necessarily have self-awarenesses. Older dancers will think that they can get away with dancing. Like, that was the lesson I learned. Like, in my first year as an exotic dancer, older dancers don't realize when they've stopped being sexy. They think they can still go to the club and do their thing and make their money, and everything's just going to be fine. And one of the things I told my husband when I got together with him was, I don't trust myself to have that awareness. So when I get older, I want you to tell me that it's time for me to retire. I don't want customers looking at me and calling me the Crypt Keeper, you know? That just not something I want for myself. And so then, he told me to retire at the age of 28, which was, honestly, even objectively speaking, was way too young. I mean, and he had his reasons. The money was starting to go down, then OnlyFans took off, so now, there's probably not very much money left in the industry. It is a dying industry. But now that I'm, getting pretty close to 40, I'm looking at it and thinking, because I knew some older dancers, at some of the other clubs that I worked at, and they were older, but they were still really fit, and they still looked pretty good, pretty okay. And they had an older clientele that they would work with, and, older men who, were still about 20 years their senior would look at them and, still think they were pretty. And there was one gal in particular, she just looked like she was having a good time. She had a day job, and then she would come into the strip club in the night, and she would dance, and she would flirt with guys, and she would just have fun. And now that I'm getting to that age, there's this whole cougarish attitude that I've kind of developed where it's I can totally see myself going to a strip club, dancing for the exercise, and just kind of enjoying the atmosphere. And just being there to have a good time. Seriously and honestly, having no illusions about the fact that I am not as young, fresh, and pretty as I used to be. And it's okay. I'm here to have fun. That's what I'm here for. So I kind of see where her attitude was coming from, this older dancer that I'm talking about. I knew a few gals who, they were older dancers because they had gotten into the business and they never figured out how to get out of the business, and they were kind of stuck in it. And they just sort of, this is not a nice word, but they sort of fossilized into the business. And that wasn't so good. But then I see this older gal who, she was just clearly there to have a good time. And I can see myself being in that category where, I love dancing. I love the acrobatic stuff. I can see myself going there to just dance, do acrobatic stuff, chat with a bunch of dudes, hang out, have a beer, and then just, enjoy life. Live because you're alive and you're not dead yet. So I see where she was coming from, because as I get older, I start seeing more and more perspective-wise on what other dancers were thinking. Sometimes, not always. Some people were just crazy, but it makes more sense to me as I get older. When I was young, I was just clueless. But yeah, this older gal, it was the strangest thing. She just up and left her whole family. It was weird. It was weird. So now here I am, 38 years old, and I had a moment. I've had a few moments, actually, more and more for over the last, I don't know how many years. I don't know if it's just been the last year or if it's been the last couple years. I think it's mostly just been the last maybe 6 months that it's gotten really bad. And I finally went to my husband and said that I had a bug-out plan for the family. I was going to pack up a bag with my stuff and disappear onto a bus. I was going to go to a city that I used to work in where I know I'd be able to get a job really easily. And, ditch my phone so he couldn't find me and just be gone and leave. And obviously my husband found that to be pretty alarming. And I told him about it because I was like, yeah, this isn't a good idea, and I don't know why I keep having these thoughts. And we talked about it for a while. And I've been feeding a baby. And so I have massive amounts of prolactin in my system, which means that I am feeling very distant from my husband and very disconnected from my family. And I've been pregnant for, on and off for the last decade. So it started really, every progressive pregnancy, the hormones have messed with me a little bit more and a little bit more. And so physically and mentally at this point, I'm not in a great place. And that's just all the hormones. And you might be thinking, okay, so you're just crazy. Or, okay, so you just have postpartum depression. It's not entirely. The hormones just mess with me. I have pelvic organ prolapse. My insides are falling out between my legs. That's because I don't know if it's the prolactin or a different hormone. One of the hormones that goes through your system when you're pregnant loosens all your connective tissue. So literally everything just starts falling, and that's bad. My doctor looked at it and told me that it is sufficiently bad that they're going to have to do reconstructive surgery, which always makes me kind of laugh because they're going to have to give me a vaginoplasty, which is what, you know, all these trans male to female people have when they're having a vagina surgically constructed for themselves. Well, it's also called a vaginoplasty when you have a vagina surgically reconstructed. And so I'm going to get a vaginoplasty. But anyway, I had somebody on, very, very right-wing lady, just completely disgusted with me, like, how dare you, you pervert. And I'm sitting there, it's like, I didn't take the time to explain to her that it's a surgical reconstructive surgery to improve my quality of life and basically help me to live a normal life, because that's why they call it reconstructive surgery. It's not plastic surgery. It's not particularly optional. It's like, oh, you're in chronic pain and you have like reduced function in various bodily functions and you can barely walk sometimes, and like, yeah, there's issues, right? But she was like, oh, you pervert. And it's just kind of like, all right, you're funny. But yeah, so I've got a lot of physical problems, lingering physical problems from my pregnancies, which have been like slowly building up and accumulating over the course of time. And then I also have all the mental problems because the hormones have been just building up in my system and causing havoc, honestly, in my system. So at this point, I feel extremely distant from my husband. I can't, when I've talked in previous videos about having hypoactive sexual desire disorder, it means I can't feel sexual feelings. I have to take medication to feel sexual feelings, and even with the medication at this point, it's not doing much to help me feel things. Like, mentally and physically, I am shut down. And I mean, that's because I have massive amounts of prolactin in my system so that I can feed a baby. So that's great. Baby's getting fed. He's growing. He's healthy as a little baby can possibly be. He's doing great. I am a mess. I am a train wreck. And so my husband's looking at it, and he, you know, I'm telling him about this stuff, and I'm like, I don't want a divorce, but I do want to run away from home. And I have a lot of knowledge on how to do that very successfully. And so he sat down with me and he starts looking up like all these different like Reddit posts from various women who are like, yeah, breastfeeding is destroying my marriage. Breastfeeding is driving me insane. My wife's breastfeeding has caused her to completely become distant to me. Just all these various things. So, you know, it's not just me. This stuff will drive a person crazy. And so he's talking with me about that. It's like, you're not in a good place mentally. And it's like, okay, I believe you. And so we kind of started piecing together. I haven't been able to get enough sleep. I don't know if you guys have noticed over the last, like, I don't know how many months, how puffy my eyes are. I can't sleep at night. Like, during the pregnancy, I couldn't sleep at night because I had RLS, because pregnancy gives me RLS. Among all the other problems it gives me, it also gives me RLS. Now I don't have the RLS, but I have children who wake up in the middle of the night and raid the kitchen, or, you know, trash things, or just get up and wander around the house, or have nightmares and need me to comfort them. So I don't sleep at night. I don't get enough exercise. I don't know how healthy my diet always is. Like, I try, but there's only so much you can do. And on top of that, I don't get a chance to rest. I'm working from the moment I wake up in the morning to the moment I go to bed. And usually, even after I go to bed, I get woken up in the middle of the night, so I'm not ever able to just relax and turn off. My husband, you know, after we were talking about this, he decided to schedule a date for us. I don't know how many months it's been since we had a date. It was really wonderful. We had a fantastic date. But it's like, when do we get to spend time together? Like, we're two strangers who live in a house together who are just constantly working at keeping everything from falling apart. And you can't feel connected to your partner when you're just bouncing around separately on your own track. So, you know, we had a date, and that was very nice. You know, I have a lot going on mentally and physically. And it got me thinking. I remember so many strip clubs I worked at where I talked with like either the bouncers or the managers or the DJs, and they'd be like, well, you know how strippers are. And I just kind of looked at it, was like, yeah, strippers are crazy. strippers have a tendency, and I'm just going to call it stripper bug out mode because that's kind of what happens. We have a tendency to just disappear. Strippers will bug out sometimes, and that's just normal. Like, it is very common for strippers to just kind of disappear on you, and that's it. A lot of strippers keep burner phones. A lot of strippers just delete their online social media accounts and just vanish. A lot of strippers will come into the club one night and then just never come back. I've done this in multiple clubs that I've worked at. It's not that uncommon. It's actually very common. And the thing is, we're all independent contractors. I know a lot of people look at that and they go, "Oh, she calls herself an independent contractor." But we're independent contractors. So we come into the club, we do our business, we leave the club. We aren't employed by the club. We can leave anytime we want to. And a lot of us do. We come in, we spend a day working, we decide we don't feel it, we just turn around, we leave. That's extremely common. My mentor, the gal who taught me just the ins and outs of the business, who taught me how to make a living as an exotic dancer, really good friend of mine, just loved her to death, wonderful lady. I lost her one day. Like, I just lost her. And I mean, she told me that she had a tendency to just delete all her social media accounts and vanish. And I knew that, and so we kind of kept in touch, but you know, I kind of just lost her one day. And that's not uncommon. I've gone looking for her a few times, hoping that maybe I'll find her, but no, she's gone. I haven't seen her in over a decade. I honestly do not know if she's alive or dead. This is not uncommon. There are a lot of people who saw me one day and never saw me again. Strippers are like that. Strippers do that. And part of it is just the nature of the business, but part of it is, strippers will have like customers who will start stalking them. They'll have toxic boyfriends who start getting a little too controlling. They'll have business interests that are, elsewhere. They'll go to a club and it's like, what, I'm only making about $200 a night here, but if I go over to that other club, I'll make $500 a night. And so they just vanish. And if you're not close to them, if you don't have their phone number, you're not going to have any way of contacting them. So one day they're coming in and one day they're not. And we kind of know when someone's gone missing because there have been occasions where, like, there was one woman who went missing and there were missing posters in the changing rooms. Have you seen this woman? Because she'd actually gone missing and she'd been murdered. But a lot of us, we just sort of vanish. And for me, like, I in particular didn't get close with most of the strippers that I knew. Like, especially as I got older in the business and I'd been there longer, I realized it just wasn't worth it to make friends in the industry. And so I just kept to myself. And I minded my own business, and I had kind of work friends that I would get along with, but I kept to myself. And so, I'd come and go, and people would know me. They'd know my face, they'd know my name, but that was it. In fact, they only really knew my stage name. Not many of them knew my real name. And, when I left, that was the end of it for a lot of them. There were some that I was friends with on Facebook, but then I stopped using Facebook. And so now there's only four. Yeah, there's only 4 people from when I was an exotic dancer that I still have any kind of connection with whatsoever. And of those, only one of them is still kind of a friend. I actually need to call him and we need to have coffee someday. It's been a while. That's kind of the life. And so I was thinking about how, as a person who's in the exotic dance industry, particularly if you're in the industry for a long time, you get into this habit of just leaving. Nobody's, particularly for people like me who were kind of travelers and we were very solo kinds of people, nobody really knew us that well. Nobody would miss us if we left. We didn't have to keep in touch with anyone. We weren't keeping tabs on anyone. Nobody was keeping tabs on us. So, when we left, we just left. You grab your gear, you take it home with you one evening, and then you just don't come back. And that kind of became a bit of a habit for me. And I never thought about it that way, but I got very used to just being on my own and disappearing off into the night whenever I felt like it. And now that I'm older and life kind of got hard and life kind of got stressful, I'm tired and I'm kind of overworked and I'm pretty burnt out, and I've got physical problems, and I've also got some mental issues that are resulting from all these hormones that are making me feel kind of not like myself. And I've got all these like tiny things in my life that are sort of adding up and accumulating to make me just really, really stressed out and worn down. And also, I have no personal time. I have no personal space. I am a human jungle gym for small people who like run up and climb all over me. At some point, I got to this like invisible limit where it was like, all right, I am officially stressed out and I've exhausted all my other coping mechanisms, and so I'm going to resort back to this really old coping mechanism that really worked for me all the time when I was younger. I'm just going to pack up a bag and disappear to another city, and I'll be fine because I know all the places that I can hang out there. I know all the places that I can work. I know all the places I can go to get money. I know all the places I can go to get shelter. I can disappear if I want to, without giving anybody any kind of notice whatsoever. Just one day, go, and I'll be fine. It's the stripper bug out mode. You get stressed out enough, you get overwhelmed enough, and it's like a little switch flips in your brain and says, hey, you know what? I know how to fix this problem. Because we've had problems in the past that we've fixed before by just disappearing. So all I need to do is just disappear, and everything's going to be better. And I realized, because I've had this conversation with my husband back and forth, because he's noticed that my moods seem really unstable. And it's really funny because I was thinking about it, because I've heard so many times everybody's like, oh, strippers make horrible wives. You can't make a good wife out of a stripper. And it's like, well, there's the loyalty issue. A lot of guys who get together with strippers, they kind of expect disloyalty from those strippers. And a lot of people assume that I've been disloyal to my husband, and that's not really the case. Like, yeah, I was a dancer for a while when we got together, but I never cheated on him. And I'm never gonna cheat on him. He knows it, I know it. He never worries about that. So the loyalty issue isn't really an issue. The issue is that if I get stressed enough and if things get crazy enough, I flip over into bug out mode and say, hey, I think the best solution for our problems right now is me just packing up a bag and disappearing, because I've decided that I'm not good for you, that I'm a toxic influence in your life, that I'm probably a bad person for you to be around, so it would probably be in your best interest if I just disappeared. I had a moment like that right after my friend, the one that I talked about in my other video, who called DCS on our family because she thought we had too many pet cats. Basically, she thought we were too poor to afford pets or animals, or just, I don't know what she was thinking, because she was not the brightest person, so it was probably really stupid person logic, but she called DCS on us, so DCS showed up at her house, and I looked at it and was like, I invited this crazy bitch into our lives. I'm responsible for this. I made a decision that was really bad for my family, and so then I was telling my husband that I was going to leave, and he kind of told me that was ridiculous and stupid. But that was one of the times that I had that thought. And then just recently, before we had our date, my husband is awesome. I don't know how many men on this world would put up with the kind of crap that he's put up with, because the hormones really did drive me crazy. But he's been really good about how, I told him that I was thinking, about just disappearing, which isn't good. We have 5 small children, and he sat down with me and, told me that it was probably the prolactin, and we looked up some of the symptoms of these of prolactin related issues, and sure enough, it's probably a hormonal issue just because I'm actively feeding a baby. So we're weaning the baby. Like, we started that day. It was like, yeah, he's close enough to the 1 year mark. He'll be fine. Also, you know, he scheduled a date for us like that day because he's like, look, we need to start spending time together. We need to start reconnecting. We need to. He's been also trying to let me sleep more, like arranging things so that I have more opportunities to get more sleep, because I've been running on so little sleep for such a long time that, I mean, it's obviously affected me physically, but it can't be good to try to live off as little sleep as I've been living off of. So yeah, I need to take better care of myself. I don't plan on running away from my family anytime soon. Like, it's one of those things where when you start getting hit with the reality of it, like, you're actually really planning on leaving your small children, your baby, you're planning on leaving all that. It's like, oh wait, that's actually a really horrible idea, isn't it? It's like, yeah, that's a really horrible idea. But I'm just wondering, like, how many exotic dancers have that coping mechanism just kind of built into their psychology after a period of time. Like, after you've been an exotic dancer long enough, you have this sense. And I mean, I've noticed myself talking about it in other videos where it's like, oh, if I can just get to a strip club, everything's going to be fine. Like my video, I'll post it right here. This video right here where I was like, I just need to get to a strip club. If I can just get to a strip club, everything's going to be okay. As soon as I get to a strip club, get some cash on hand, I'm going to buy myself some food, I'll be fine. I'll get myself like a soda or something. I'll be fine. Once I get to a strip club, I'm set. I just need to get my ass to a strip club, okay? What are you going to do? You know, there was nowhere to go. I just kind of like looked at it, was like, all right, just play it cool. Get through this, you know? I just need to get myself to a strip club. Then I'm going to be fine. I just need to get to a strip club and then I can take control from there. I just need to get to a strip club. That place becomes your lifeline. Like, if I can get to a strip club, I can get money immediately. It's like an instant ATM. I go to a strip club, I can get $300 that night. And I can find myself a hotel room, and I can find myself some food. And I can start planning where I need to go in order to keep myself safe. I can start figuring out where I'm going from there. If I can just get to a strip club, all my immediate emergency needs will be met immediately. All I need to do is get to a strip club, and everything's going to be okay.
And yes, I do need to be aware of the possibility that one day 90-year-old Barbara will be sitting in the nursing home with dementia, demanding you to go to the strip club because she's feeling confused and anxious, and the strip club is what her addled brain spits out as a safe place where all her problems will become manageable.
I mean, obviously not a great idea for me at this point in my life, since I don't want to lose my entire family. And so we're working on other ways to keep me from, you know, bugging out, basically. And a lot of it just involves, you know, basic self-care, which has been pretty badly neglected at this point in my life. So, you know, going back to the beginning of this video, I was thinking about that gal who just up and left her family and hopped on, I think it was a train. She hopped on a train and just showed up in our town and got a job at a club. And I kind of wonder, like, what was it that set her off? Not remotely logical, but you have this kind of ingrained sense, because that's how you find your equilibrium when you're an exotic dancer. You can travel to any city in the United States, virtually any city in the United States, and just find your sense of equilibrium. Once you get there, like, just drop on in and start building your life up from that point onward, as long as you can find a strip club. Like, you find that, you're going to be okay. So maybe that was what was driving her. I don't know. Maybe it was something else. Maybe she just really didn't want to face the fact that she wasn't young and beautiful anymore. But she was one of those girls who'd been a dancer since she was, like, too young to legally dance. She told me about how she'd used a fake ID to get into the business. And didn't want to give it up. And I guess maybe saw this as her last hurrah, but it was already way too late. And so it's weird. It's weird. So anyway, you guys are probably going to notice that I'm making a bunch of videos where I sit down with my husband, the two of us cuddle up on the couch together, and we read A Court of Thorns and Roses. And you might be thinking that that's like maybe I've lost a lot of subscribers since I started posting those videos, and it's kind of like, well, maybe you guys think I'm just doing something dumb and vapid, but I want to spend time with him. I want to do something just kind of lighthearted and fun. He's got a beautiful sense of humor. And so it's really fun to not necessarily read the book, but read the book and listen to his reaction to the book. And so I've been having just a great time doing that. And I think that's going to be good for us. Like, I know that I feel bad because I felt a lot of pressure to make videos about a lot of the transgender issues that are going on in our country right now, like in the US. You should be talking about all this stuff that Trump is doing in the military and, all the stuff that's going on in the transgender world. I don't have anything to add. I might make a video like that eventually, but right now I'm just looking at it like, I don't know what to say, guys, So, yeah. I think I'm just going to make some videos that are just fun. Anyway, if you haven't checked those videos out, just maybe consider keeping an open mind about it. Imagine a typical man's reaction to a romance novel and how amusing that might be. And take a look. Until then, I hope you guys are all in good health, and I'll talk to you all later.